What's going on, guys? It's me, Paterson, here again with another video, and today I'm going to be telling you 5 different ways to up your design game instantly. This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain. You may be thinking, well, how could you ever up your design game that quickly? Well, there's a few different methods that I have seen people struggle with over the years, and I have been a logo designer and a hand lettering artist for the nearly 6 years now, for over 6 years actually, 7. And I've been doing YouTube for 4 of those years as well, so I get a lot of questions asked to me about how to improve your logo. So here is 5 different ways to up your design game instantly, whether it's logo design, hand lettering, or everything else. Number 1, keep it geometric. I do a logo critique series on this channel where I take your logos and I critique them, and I also critique other big brand logos on this channel too. And the main thing that people struggle with when it comes down to being a logo designer or creating a logo or designing a platform or a portfolio is simplicity in geometry. By that I mean people do not keep things simple, and you've heard it all the time. You've got to keep a logo simple. It's supposed to be simple is more. But how do you do it? Well, the first tip is to use geometry. Now, geometry is like perfect shapes. And what I mean by this is that when you're designing a logo or creating that animal icon or designing that layout for that company or that book cover, use simple geometry to make the design even simpler. This is a really good piece of advice for anyone who wants to do logo design for a living, because when you're designing a logo and you're creating an animal or something else, it can be really difficult to create one simply. And the way to do it is by looking at the geometry of the animal and using shapes like squares, circles, triangles, hexagons within the design to keep it simple. Try not to use a pen tool too much. By only using circles, squares, and other geometric shapes, it forces your design to be really simple. And the way to do this is when you're sketching it, get a bit of tracing paper over the top of your idea and map out where the simple shapes are, like the square or the circle or the line or anything else. Geometry works and it makes everything super simple. Following on from that point, number 2 is to always sketch first. Sketching for designers is kind of now a lost art that is having a resurgence back into the industry. Since computers have been about, we've been letting computers do all the sketching. You know what I mean by this. You know, you want to get into Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, or Photoshop and just go right in there and create a logo from the shapes and the tools that it gives you within there. Now, the problem with doing this is that when you're creating in Illustrator a logo design or a layout for someone, when you're doing this, you're using the Illustrator's tools and it's limiting you to what you could create. Now, when you sketch first, you get rid of the bad ideas and you have a process to follow. Now, when you're sketching, your mind is thinking about the concept and it's not thinking about the end product, the finalized version. Now, when you're in Illustrator, you end up, and I know everyone does this, something that ends up happening when you're just using Illustrator is that you spend all your time or most of it finalizing a bad idea that doesn't work because you didn't do the testing in the sketching, if that makes sense. So before you do a website layout, before you do a brochure, before you do a book, before you go ahead and design that logo, whether it's typographic or whether it is an icon, make sure you sketch bad ideas down. Get all your ideas down in a sketch. Having one pencil and paper limits the options of what you can do. The third tip to up your design game instantly is symmetry. If you're a hand lettering artist, then you'll know that composition, when you have multiple words stacked together, is really difficult when you're using type, and having to draw that and come up with clever compositions where, you know, you got the type up here and down there, it's really difficult. Now, symmetry isn't just involved in hand lettering. By symmetry, I mean the composition. So if you've got a logo, using symmetry can work. The Apple logo uses an element of symmetry to it because you're using only a few shapes for that logo. Symmetry also is under the banner of balance, making sure that things look balanced out so that one end isn't too big or that the other end is too small, fat, wide, or colorful. Making sure that it follows the brand that you're working with, or if you're creating a brand, making sure that you're actually working with them on that. Symmetry is always pleasing to the eye. Really, no matter what you do, you can have any composition and it is really pretty if it's symmetrical, especially if you're a hand lettering artist. I've created created many logos using symmetry and not the golden ratio, which is surprising to a lot of people, and it looks so much better and balanced than it would be by using the Fibonacci sequence for no reason or just by doing whatever I wanted to do. Symmetry also makes sure that you sketch. It also makes sure that you keep it simple from sketching and using geometric shapes, and also means that you're able to reflect on it. So let's run down those three again. So we've got using geometric shapes to keep the logo or your overall design of a brochure simple. The second one was to sketch to get all your ideas out so you're not fluffed up with a bad idea and finalizing a bad idea. And the third one is symmetry. Use symmetry in your compositions or your icons to make it look cool. And if you can't use symmetry, use balance. The fourth tip to up your design game instantly, and this is a bit of a strange tip and I've talked about it before, but it is to test. Testing is something that I do as part of my daily job. I test logo designs all the time to see whether they work. Now, me being primarily a logo type designer, this means that I have to test whether the logo type can be seen when it's big, small, chopped in half, everything else. Now, I've come up with a few ways of testing a logo to make sure that it is readable and legible and that has its own unique stance in the overall saturated marketplace of logos. So the first thing you can do to test your logo type or icon is to reflect it. Now, especially when it comes to typography, when you reflect the typography or the logo type, you're not looking at the word or the letter forms as letter forms. You're looking at this logo now as shapes to see whether something lines up or doesn't line up. The other way you can do this is by adding a Gaussian blur. So you can duplicate the icon, logo type, or whatever you're working on, and you can add a Gaussian blur. And what this will do is this will blur your vision of the logo, which means that it's harder to see. Now, the more recognizable the logo it is when it has a Gaussian blur or some sort of distortion on it, means that the logo is more effective and functional, which is a good job. Now, you can see the mistakes by doing this as well. You can see where you need to add more balance to it, or less weight to this side, or something over there, or we need to take all this out. Distorting your work and testing it and making sure that it works, it will up your design game because it's showing you a different perspective of your work. So don't always just think, I like the work that I see there. Make sure you do the testing, because when you are not so easily satisfied, your work will go up. The final tip, number 5, is for anyone who is not really a designer, but someone who is just looking for some tips about designing whatever they're designing right now. And this is hierarchy with contrast. As designers, we are visually communicating a message towards a lot of people. That is what we do. We like to make our visuals enticing, but we also need to make sure that the communication part is there. As graphic design is not an art, it is a design, so it's intentional. So what I mean by hierarchy by contrast is that when you're using typography or when you're creating a flyer, a banner, or like an advertising campaign thumbnail, using contrast is going to help people see the message that you want them to see. So by this, I mean you must map out the words that you want to see or you want to get across. Now, these two words that you could use, let's say, I want to go home, the words that you're going to value the most that you want to get people to see is probably, I want to go home. So go home is going to be big. I wanna is going to be small. So that is going to be the kind of hierarchy that you'll need to use, and there's a number of ways of doing this, and this could be used by using a different font. So limiting your fonts to a few fonts will help, but having a smaller font or a font that is a bit more delicate on I want to, and then having a bold, nasty, big, fat font for Go Home, Gotham, or Futura, and it's going to make the design look even better. You can do this by skipping weights within typography. So if you're trying to get a message across to someone in like a typographic form, then you can skip a couple of different weights of a typeface in order to gain contrast, and that will bring hierarchy so it doesn't just look like a ball of text. So if you're a designer or not a designer, just make sure that you are actually using hierarchy to convey a message. There is no point in conveying the wrong word for the client. When you can show the client that you're conveying a word in a poster design or a brochure or a book, then that is going to sell to the client. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure you press that red subscribe button and that notification bell. It is completely free. If you have any tips and tricks that I have not shared on here, then put them down down in the comment section below. I just want to give a huge shout out to Dev Mountain for sponsoring this video. Dev Mountain is a 12-week UX design course intended to get you a job in the industry. If you're someone who wants to learn more about UX design or is just slightly curious about what Dev Mountain do, click that link down below and it'll take you to their website where you can see everything that they're doing. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video and I'll catch you in the next one. Subscribe, like, comment, share. I'll catch you later. Goodbye!